When a character is described as a strong and independent woman, what's the first thing that comes to your mind? Is it Katniss Everdeen, Ellen Ripley, Mulan, or is it one of these? The phrase strong and independent woman has become a charged character description. In media, this phrase wasn't much used to describe female characters until relatively recently, and with it comes a very homogeneous set of traits. Most female characters described as the strong and independent type usually demonstrate pieces of this set of characteristics: masculinity, physical strength, stubbornness, rebellious, refuses assistance, pompous, can do no wrong. And this list goes on. Strong and independent female characters have become something of their own thing, separate from other female characters. In the way I see it, these female archetypes can be broken down into 3 core roles, much in the same way it can be done for the male characters. 1, the feminine woman, a role in which the character succeeds in earning her protagonist status through feminine means. 2, the neutral, a role in which changing the character's sex wouldn't change the story aside from love lines and familial ties. And 3, the masculine woman, a role in which the character succeeds in earning her protagonist status through masculine means, otherwise known as the strong and independent woman. Now, at their core, there's nothing wrong with these archetypes, but there's a reason why the masculine woman ends up pushing fans away. The main problem with it is delivery. A couple days ago, I saw Creed 3, and aside from the impressive fight scenes and Jonathan Majors' powerhouse physique, my focus was being pulled towards Tessa Thompson. She was great in her role and reminded me of something very important, something I think we all need to talk about. This theme of the female backbone is a staple in the Rocky story, a staple in most narratives involving men battling for physical triumph. It's the age-old line of behind every great man, there is a great woman, and it's with these women that a feat such as Rocky's story, fictional or not, can be accomplished. The feminine woman is a great, yet unfortunately, an often slept-on character. Recently, Disney released the trailer to the new Peter Pan and Wendy film, which has already received some pretty heavy criticism. Peter Pan is a story of childhood innocence being robbed by adulthood and the responsibility we each have in accepting that fate. It's a beautiful tale that teaches people not to abandon the child within us as we grow older. It teaches us the values of discipline, wisdom, passion-fueled infatuation, and even the acceptance of old age and death. Peter Pan, like many of the Disney classics, is a story of the human condition, of growing up. But like many of their other properties, Disney has found it best to not let beautiful stories rest, but to instead grab the old shovel and dig up a classic for the sake of, well, honestly, at this point, I don't really know. I was gonna say money, but it isn't really like, I mean, it's going on Disney Plus anyway. It's not like, look, this movie's not going to do anything good for Disney. But what this new Peter Pan and Wendy trailer has reminded me of is studios overbearing and unclever messaging. It seems studios have become more interested in message than story. Studios have lost their touch. Studios would rather milk old properties than come up with new ones. Hire great writers to rewrite old stories instead of hiring them to write their own. They've lost originality. They've traded it in for bastardized versions of their once great stories in order to deliver uninspired messages, and with the Peter Pan and Wendy trailer, everyone is now starting to catch on. The messaging, whether you agree with it or not, has become too noticeable and too obviously pointed out that fans on all sides are starting to reject it. And as much as we can sit here and talk about every problem these studios have with their messaging, the trailer to Peter Pan and Wendy has reminded me of a perhaps niche but heavy problem. The problem is the removal of femininity. And I know, everyone who's talked about Peter Pan and Wendy has already mentioned the larger elephant in the room. Look, I know people are upset, and with good reason, for studios giving black actors hand-me-down characters instead of writing new ones. Yes, there's a huge conversation to have about the complexities of race and culture within already established canons. Yes, there are conversations to be had about studios either exploiting race for money or actually caring about inclusion. At this point, studios have made a landscape in which viewers are noticing race instead of art, as if minority characters are accessories to the production and to the company quota instead of valued participants in storytelling. Studios are screwing up, and I know that's a big conversation to have, but I'm going to be saving that for another video. And because you've made it this far, hear me out. This is the loss of femininity. Strong, independent women aren't the problem, and being a woman in a role traditionally designed for men isn't a problem either. I know and love tons of movies in which women are the strong and independent type. The success for those characters lies within the delivery, whereas the failure can lie in the same thing. It's all about delivery. No one wants to be told a character is strong and independent. We want to be shown. From Alien to The Hunger Games, these movies exist and have for a long while. These are the stereotypical strong masculine women. But it seems as though studios are forgetting this formula. They are forgetting how to make a good masculine female lead or how to make a female lead at all. Then there's the neglect the studios have for a very important side of women, the feminine side. And although these masculine female characters can be great ones, there's one thing they all have in common. One thing that the messaging of these stories does not want you to forget. I'm a woman, and I am doing what people expect a man to do. And if it's not expressly said in the film, then it's plastered all over the advertising, mentioned in interviews, and passively alluded to on screen. Female characters are being valued based on their level of masculinity. This becomes such an oversaturated theme that it's no longer an interesting tool for stories to use. They took Joan of Arc and made her the equivalent of a coffee table book. In other words, no one cares. And aside from Wendy beating up pirates, there's one moment in the trailer that's obvious messaging. After coming to the shores of Neverland, Wendy finds herself in the company of the Lost Boys, but after a small observation, Wendy says, "But you're not all boys," and a young grimace-faced girl yells back, "So?" That is forced writing. The writers felt so strongly about that message that instead of simply having young girls be a part of the Lost Boys, they had to point out that they made a change. Like, we get it. We know. Pointing out that you have an alternative opinion or take is honestly cringy, no matter what the context is. It's stale, dishonest, scrubby, boring, preachy. Look, if you have to point out the changes you've made in a traditional story, then the odds are you probably didn't do a good job at writing it in the first place. But herein lies the greater problem, the erosion of the feminine woman in multimedia. All mediums and many titles have slowly been removing woman-centric themes and femininity from their stories. Peter Pan is a story of a young girl who for a moment is just as careless as the boys and finds herself lost in Neverland. That is how the lore works. Only young boys are foolish enough to be swept off to Neverland. This is a metaphor for young boys traditionally having a harder time accepting that they are growing up. Wendy is the perfect example of women having both feminine and masculine traits, yet in the end, it's her femininity that saves her and her brothers. And the genius of this story is that the audience can figure out this message without it being expressly told to them or having it ruined by agenda-style writing. Additionally, the Lost Boys were never a symbol of exclusion, which some may have come to believe. A band of boys marching around the woods playing make-believe may seem to be exclusionary, but it's not the point. If anything, these boys were helpless young men who needed a mother, someone to teach them, a smart and rational someone to show them the way. They are not the Lost Boys because it sounds like a cool name. They aren't the Lost Boys because they're far out in the woods hidden from danger. They are the Lost Boys because they are spiritually lost. Age is approaching them, but they are not ready to grow up. They fear responsibility and change. Peter Pan is Disney's Catcher in the Rye, and a mother is what they need, and Wendy gave that to them. Wendy was the logic-driven motherly figure that these boys needed, and that's a powerful message. That message is of female maturity and fearlessness in the eyes of the unavoidable struggle known as life. The message is about how masculinity cannot survive without femininity, and the reverse is just as true. That's shown through Peter Pan and how not only does he rescue Wendy and fight off all the pirates, but he's also the reason for the character's exploration of the unknown and the fervor they have for risk-taking. And without that masculinity, the world wouldn't know the beauty and power of femininity. The riches of femininity cannot survive without the boldness of masculinity to protect it. And without femininity, masculinity would swallow itself, much in the way the Lost Boys and Peter Pan became stagnant, immature, and, well, lost. Peter Pan attempts to teach us that a woman's most common and natural strength is insight. Yet studios are losing touch with that. They'd rather exchange that virtuous strength for something like assertion, for competitiveness, for more masculine traits. Motherhood is the strong female role. Now, that's not to say that women can't do justice to masculine roles. All it is to say is that women empowerment, which is clearly what they are trying to do here, shouldn't come from mimicking men, but from showing the necessity and importance of femininity of women. But the problem is that many have come to believe that femininity is submissive and weak, but that couldn't be further from the truth. Femininity is about teaching, nurturing, passion, cunning, patience, fortitude, resilience, stoicism, perseverance, sacrifice. The feminine role is an equal part to the masculine role. It is necessary. So to empower women, we shouldn't swap out men only for the women to play the same part. A woman in a man's role isn't concrete. This is true. Being more feminine or being more masculine is, in my opinion, a product of both nature and nurture. But it seems like the media wants women to only be more like men. Is that not insulting to femininity and in turn insulting to masculinity? In a system with equal parts, when you harm one side, you end up harming both. What studios have shown us by removing feminine roles is that women can only be strong if they're masculine. That femininity is not worth a woman's time. It's not worth center stage or a hero's praise. That a woman's triumph is only valuable when compared to masculinity. their only value is how they can be compared to a man in his traditional masculine role. That is not woman empowerment. The average woman who, yes, is going to be more feminine is not someone we should take for granted. Yes, there is always a place for the masculine woman and the feminine man. This is one of the greatest things about the yin-yang of the human condition. Humans are not computer programs. We have feelings, emotions, and sometimes that means men can be more feminine and women could be more masculine. But by studios only hyping up or pointing out female masculinity rather than their femininity, they're subliminally admitting that they know that women are usually in feminine roles, but only the masculine roles are the ones that matter. The strength and greatness of most women doesn't come from her masculinity. It comes from her femininity. The woman is powerful. The woman is necessary. So many of our stories in media when it comes to messaging about women have been about women seeking more masculinity. The destruction of the feminine woman is masquerading as a movement for equality and is led by female empowerment. And let's be clear, scenes like the one in Captain Marvel wherein she flashes back to all the times she's fallen over and gotten back up, are those scenes cringy? Oh, absolutely. But you'd be lying if you said that that scene didn't mean a whole lot to a young girl. You'd be denying yourself the truth if you said that that scene didn't inspire a young girl to ride a bike with no training wheels on. That it didn't inspire a young girl to try out for baseball because her town doesn't have enough girls for a softball team. You'd be wrong if you refused the possibility that that scene meant something to young girls. But the problem isn't that those scenes exist or that they are cringy. The problem is that the opposite side of women is being neglected. Movies only showing young girls how to be masculine or that only masculine traits are valued over feminine ones contributes to the same problem people have with young boys not being in touch with their more sensitive emotions. You'll have legions of keyboards typing into a comment section on how young men are too, well, masculine. And although I personally don't have a problem with young men honing their masculinity, people have learned to call this toxic masculinity. The point is, we are seeing people want to reduce masculinity in young men and raise it in young women. And what makes this all so much worse is what I've continued to say in this video. It's the delivery of these messages. And you may be wondering, even I'm asking myself this question. Did the Peter Pan and Wendy trailer really mean all that much to me? Is this really that big of a deal? Well, if you've watched this far, then you can probably empathize with my emotions. The thing is, you'd want to believe that the writers included young girls in The Lost Boys for a reason. You'd want to believe that the writers are weighing masculine traits down on traditionally feminine characters for a reason. And maybe that reason is because now more than ever before, women are expected to do more masculine things in society due to the rapid evolution of said society. Maybe including young girls within The Lost Boys is a way to tell the audience, hey, look, both boys and girls are struggling to grow up and leave the nest during these times of planetary uncertainty. You'd want to believe all of this because it's true, but we don't believe it. Not when it comes from movies like this, not from this type of delivery. You see, studios have been ruining their credibility. When you see a strong, independent woman, you don't think about the art or the story. You think about the politicized and cultural messaging coming from the studios. In other words, it's aggravatingly noticeable, disrespectful, and yes, offensive. And the same goes for race messaging in movies. Instead of minority characters being themselves, the movie, the advertising, the cast, everyone involved finds a way to point out that the character is a minority. Again, it's the delivery, it's overbearing, and it's ruined the way we watch movies and the way they write them. This monologue, this unorganized and perhaps at times juvenile rant is not just about Peter Pan and Wendy. This rant is about culture and the way it shaped our entertainment, and that truth is one I enjoy exploring. Movies are forgetting to represent what they are claiming to be all about, and in this moment, it's women. And like I keep saying, this is much in the same way that movies and the whole of media have been aiming to support minorities, they do it in such backwards and counterfeit ways. Ways that remind you that studios and companies aren't charitable. They don't make decisions out of love. Their decisions are motivated only and ever by money. The problem isn't that there's role reversals in movies. The problem is that they make it a point to tell you. People tend only to care about role reversals when you disrespect their intelligence by shouting from the rooftops that you made a change in their pursuit of righteousness. By molding the plot, dialogue, and story elements around the change, pointing out that a character is a woman or that a character is good at everything while being a woman or she's brave for being a woman in this role, makes for a bad story. It's not so much the change they implement in these stories that upsets people, it's the delivery. And simply put, it's lazy. Movies, which should always be about story first, have become the testing ground for virtue signaling. The flavor is gone, the originality is lost. I sometimes feel like we don't get stories anymore. Like, We get the news, and we know it. And now look, I don't know everything. I'm just some guy on the internet. Maybe I'm reading too far into these things. Maybe it really isn't that big of a problem, and it's just being artificially inflated by my own perspective. Maybe it's nothing, but then again, maybe I'm right. There's a lot to talk about when it comes to cultural messaging in movies and how that messaging changes the way we see the world. Feminine representation, or the lack thereof, is something that I, in this moment, felt passionate about, and I had thoughts I wanted to share. I don't think it's wrong or a bad thing for women to have masculine roles. All I've been meaning to say is that 1, the messaging in modern movies is far too obvious and overbearing. And 2 is that we have an absence of female-led feminine roles, and I do believe that if one's goal is to empower women, then it should be through femininity. Again, masculinity can be and is found in women, just like femininity can be and is found in men. But if the goal is to be inclusionary, why are we excluding femininity? That's not to say that we don't have those roles, because of course we do. But putting women in masculine roles or swapping out men for women in pre-established roles and then pointing it out is what's bad. The problem at its core is that studios, writers, they're trying to fix a problem that they are supplying themselves. By pointing out that I am a woman and I can do it too, you are directly contributing to the idea that women can't actually do it. By pointing out that you fixed something makes people believe that there was something wrong to begin with, when really, there never was. If you want to have female leads play more masculine roles, then don't tell us they're different. And don't tell us that they're cool. Don't tell us how equal they are or how strong they are. Show us. And at the same time, don't forget that perhaps a woman's power comes not from her masculinity, but from her femininity. And both can be expressed in lead roles. But hey, again, maybe I'm reading too far into this. Maybe I'm preaching to a crowd that doesn't exist. Maybe I'm the only one. But I'm okay with that. Anyway, thank you for watching this video. If you made it all this way, that means you must like these conversations. And if that's true, make sure you check out the video at the end of this. It'll be like, when you click a video, it'll be right there. Make sure you check it out, because I think you'd like it a whole lot. And if there's anything I missed, if there's something you want to add, or if you think I'm downright crazy, let me know in the comments below. Thank you for coming. I'm glad you made it. And I'll see you on the next one.